Hi guys, and welcome back to day 9 of the program. What we have planned today is to talk about is our scale of the day, which is F major. We're starting to go over to the flat scales. F major is the first one, and it has one flat, and that's B flat. So the F major scale intervals is F is our tonic, G is our major second, A is our major third, B flat is our perfect fourth, C is our perfect fifth, D is our major sixth, E is our major seventh, and F is our perfect eighth. The scale degrees is F's the tonic, G is the supertonic, A is the median, B flat is the subdominant, C is the dominant, D is the submedian, and E is the leading tone, as F is the octave of the scale. Our triad chords for F major is our first chord is F major, F, A, C. Our second chord is G minor, G, B flat, D. Our third chord is A minor, G, C, E. Our fourth chord is B flat major, B flat, D, F. Our fifth chord is C major, C, E, G. Our sixth chord is D minor, D, F, A. And then our seventh chord is E diminished with E, G, and B flat. So I hope you have a chance to try the triad chords of the scale, and if not, just play at least one octave of F major. So we're going to continue talking about types of learners. What we're talking about today is verbal learners. So verbal learners learn best through the words they hear. Typically, they love both written and spoken word, excelling in both. These learners often go into public speaking, writing, journalism, and debating. Verbal learners tend to flourish in reading and writing activities. They ask questions and have an excellent verbal expression. Often gifted at learning new languages, they have a large vocabulary and enjoy learning new words, dislike silence, and enjoy participating in study groups. For example, reading definitions of a word out loud or writing them down a few times are ways for verbal learners to process information. You're a verbal learner if you need to read content out loud to learn something, or prefer or to have someone explain it to you so you can process it. Now, relating that skill as a musician, this is how you can practice verbal skills. So one of the ways that you can learn as a verbal learner is that you're notating music. So writing out the fingering on your music and saying that out loud is a great way to practice verbal learning skills. So this can go hand in hand with air fingering, is you're saying the fingering out loud. Next, you're also saying it out loud, but you're using your fingers on your instrument. After that, you play the piece. So this is what that looks like. So I have the gavotte here from Suzuki Book 3. I wrote out the fingerings for just like the first line. And it's important that whenever you're trying to verbally learn this way, that you're saying the fingerings with the right rhythms as well. So I'm going to say it real quick. I'm going to count myself up. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, open, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, open, 3, 2, 1, 1, open, 3, 2, open. So that's what that would look like. The next step is for me to bring my instrument but not use my bow. One, 2, 3, 2, 1, open, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, open, 3, 2, 1, 1, open, 3, 2, open. And then after that, I'm ready to play. And that's how that would go. And you can do this even if you don't really think fingering is the issue. It's just a great way to connect, for your mind to connect your words with your fingers all done at the same time. So I would recommend that you do it again, just make sure you're doing it in the right rhythm. Another way that you can learn, and this can kind of go hand in hand with a visual learner, is marking. So part of visualizing can be notating your music. So Your copy of the music is just like your copy of a school book. It's yours. You can write anything that you need to in there, saying out loud the note names or the fingerings or clapping and saying the rhythm aloud. Those are ways that verbal learners can learn with music. So I would always recommend that you clap out the rhythm. This is a great way, and this has to do with tactile learning because that's hands-on. It's also a verbal thing too, especially if you want to say the fingerings with that as well. So that's that for verbal learning. We're next going to talk about how to practice tricky spots. I'm going to use a couple of the pieces to show you how to break that down for you. So we're going to go into how to practice tricky spots. We're going to be playing from Suzuki Book 5, the Concerto in A minor by Vivaldi. So I just picked that because it seemed like a very complicated thing at first glance. So how to practice tricky spots is always to really just simplify it. Think about when you have math and it gets complicated with fraction, you always simplify to get it down to the smallest number. So to a sense, we're also doing that with music. We're taking very complicated parts and bringing it down to simple. So let's say you're having a really hard time playing all of this. So I'm gonna play just note by note out loud. I'm gonna start with that. So once I'm all good with the notes, I can add in the rhythm. So first we'll do rhythm and the notes. And then next, we'll add in those bowings. So let's try to do that with a more complicated spot. Let's go to measure, we'll pick up to measure 7. So that kind of looks complicated. We have to find out where the beats are. So we have one of the beats here, another here, here, and here. And it's just subdividing. Subdividing is very important. So we can play it super, super slow in order for us to get it. So 1, 2, 3. So this would be a great spot to practice with the metronome. So writing out those beats is, let's say you just don't know where the beat would be. Writing out the beats lets you know that this is one beat. This is another beat. This is a whole beat. This is a beat. And that way when you're going to the next beat, you know that you should be there. So I always recommend writing out the big beats. So and that's how you can really just simplify those really hard spots. And if anything, if that's too much for you, try just practicing the first note of each of those beats. So, and then maybe like every half beat or something. And then you just add in the rhythm. There's so many different ways that you can practice. You don't have to just play it from start to finish, right? We want to just find different ways to practice stuff. So same here. This can be a little tricky. So if we find out where every beat is, we can narrow down how everything's supposed to stand. So a quarter is definitely a beat. This is 16th notes. That's another beat. These look the same. That's going to be a beat, and this is going to be a beat. So we have 16, 32nd, 64 second notes. So we can go slow. Probably for something like this, you want to play slowly to get the notes. So for this, it all stays on the A string. It's not too complicated. Now, let's try to go more in tempo. Right, and that's and that was going really fast actually, because now just looking at the tempo, it's largo. So it's super slow. But you would be able to play at that kind of speed if you're able to break it down. So for anything super complicated, first of all, get the notes. Then try to figure out the rhythm, write out the beats for that, and kind of figure out where would my big beats be, and subdivide. If you subdivide, everything just can be so much simpler. So those are a couple ways to practice tricky spots. Like I said, just find different ways to practice them. Always simplify, and that way it'll just be so much more doable. Our composer of the day is Liszt. Franz Liszt was born in 1811 in Hungary and was a Hungarian piano virtuoso and composer. Among his many notable compositions are his 12 symphonic poems, 2 completed piano concerti, several sacred choral works, and a great variety of solo piano pieces. Liszt's father, Adam Liszt, was an official in the service of Prince Nicholas Esterházy, whose palace was frequented by many celebrated and famous musicians. Adam Liszt was a talented amateur musician who played the cello in the court concerts. By the time Franz was 5 years old, he was already drawn to the piano and was soon given lessons by his father. Liszt began to show interest in both church and gypsy music. He developed into a religious child also because of the influence of his father, who during his youth spent 2 years in the Franciscan order. Franz began to compose at the age of 8. When only 9, he made his public appearance as a concert pianist. His playing so impressed the local Hungarian magnates that they put the money to pay for his musical education for the next 6 years. Liszt's father, Adam, took a leave of absence from his post at Prince Esterházy's court and took Franz to Vienna, where he had piano lessons with Karl Szczerny, a composer and pianist who had been a pupil of Ludwig van Beethoven, and studied compositions with Antonio Salieri, the musical director at the Viennese court. Liszt gave several concerts in Vienna with great success. The legend that Beethoven attended one of Liszt's concerts and kissed the prodigy on the forehead is considered rumor, but Liszt certainly did meet Beethoven. Liszt moved with his family to Paris when he was 12, giving concerts in Germany on the way. He was not accepted admission to the Paris Conservatory because he was a foreigner. So instead he studied with a theorist who was a student of Joseph Haydn's brother, Michael. Other concerts quickly followed, as well as a visit to London in June. He toured England around the following year, playing for George IV at Windsor Castle, and also visiting Manchester, where his new Grand Overture was performed for the first time. At 15, Liszt was suffering from nervous exhaustion and expressed a desire to become a priest. His father took him to Boulogne to take sea baths to improve his health. There, his father died of typhoid fever. Liszt returned to Paris and sent for his mother to join him, and she had gone back to Australia during the Liszt tours. Liszt now earned his living mainly as a piano teacher, and when he was 17, he fell in love with one of his students. When her father insisted that the attachment broke off, Liszt again became extremely ill. He was considered so close to death that his obituary appeared in the Paris newspaper. Can you imagine? They already printed your bio and you're just about you dying when you're still alive. I can't imagine what he must have felt. But his illness, he underwent a long period of depression and doubt about his career. For more than a year, he did not touch the piano and was discouraged from joining the priesthood only through the efforts of his mother. He experienced much religious pessimism, seeing the worst. During this period, Liszt took an active dislike to the career of a virtuoso. Between his early 20s, he met 3 men who were to have a great influence on his life. First, he met Hector Berlioz and heard the first performance of Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. From Berlioz, he inherited the command of the romantic orchestra and also the diabolical quality that remained with him for the rest of his life. He achieved the seemingly impossible feat of transcribing Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique for the piano in 1833, and he helped Berlioz by transcribing other works of his and playing them in concert. In March 1831, he heard Niccolò Paganini play for the first time. He again became interested in virtuoso technique and resolved to transfer some of Paganini's fantastic violin effects on the piano, writing a fantasia on his La Campanella. So if you remember, we talked about Niccolò Paganini last week, and I showed a video from La Campanella, and Liszt was the one who wrote the piano part for that. At this time, he also met Friedrich Chopin, whose poetic style of music brought a profound influence on Liszt. So Liszt was not only the greatest piano virtuoso of his time, but also a composer of enormous originality and a principal figure in the Romantic movement. As a composer, he radically extended the technique of piano writing, giving the instrument not only brilliance, but a full and rich, almost orchestral sound. Most of his compositions bear titles and are representations of some natural scene or of some poetic idea or work of literature or art. Liszt extended the harmonic language of his time, even in his earlier works, and his later development of chromatic harmony helped lead eventually to the breakdown of tonality and ultimately to the atonal music of the 20th century. Liszt also invented the symphonic poem for orchestras and the method of transformation of themes, by which one or two themes in different forms can provide the basis for an entire work, a principle from which Wagner derived his system of so-called leitmotifs in his operas. Apart from more of his 700 compositions, Liszt was the author of books on Friedrich Chopin, Hungarian gypsy music, Wagner's Lohengrin and Tannhäuser, John Field's Nocturnes, the leader of Robert Franz, and the Goethe Foundation in Weimar. His published essays and correspondence fill many volumes. A controversial figure in his time, he was attacked for his innovations, and his rivals were jealous of his brilliance and panache. For a long time, he was regarded merely as a superficial composer of brilliant trifles. But in the recent years, his true stature has been seen more clearly as that of a composer who revolutionized the music of his time and anticipated numerous later developments. So today's practice goal is to practice using verbal learning skills. So I hope you had fun, and then we'll see you tomorrow.